about Boston. And that guy right there, Jayson Tatum, with the 3 plus the foul to make this one a 4-point play. He finished with 30 points, 7 rebounds, and 11 assists. Hey, speaking of three-pointers, Boston took 24 threes. They win 128-96. We're joined by CBS Sports NBA analyst John Gonzalez in an absolute deconstruction of the Sixers by the Celtics in Game 4. They managed to pick them even with Joel Embiid returning, and I want to talk more about Embiid returning in just a minute. But while Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, let's be honest, they were both productive, they didn't even have to carry the offense in this one. I want to know what stood out to you most just in this dominating win we did see on the road for the C's.
Yeah, this is the version of the Celtics that we expected to see for much of the series. The Sixers stole a game in Game 2 on the road in Boston, and, credit to them. But the Celtics are just so much better, and we saw it tonight. You mentioned the Jays didn't even have to carry them because Peyton Pritchard went absolutely wild. He goes for 32 points, almost set a Celtics franchise record for most points coming off the bench in a playoff game, just 2 off of what Kevin McHale did back in the day. But he was also 6 of 12 from deep. And the Celtics have had a theory of the case, Kiana, for a while now, and that is they're going to take more threes and make more threes than the opposition. Some nights they don't fall, then they're gettable. Tonight they fell. They took 53 three-point attempts and made 24. The Sixers couldn't come anywhere close to that, right? They took 30 and only made 9. It was sort of reminiscent of Game 1 when they only made 4. And I kind of like, on the one hand, I think, the Sixers can't really keep up with that. On the other hand, I think, what were the Sixers thinking not taking more threes earlier in this game before it got out of hand? Because you knew what the Celtics were doing. You saw how hot Peyton Pritchard was. And before you knew it, they tipped the ball, Kiana, and the game was over.
It literally was from the start of this game, and the Boston didn't look back at any point. You would think we would see a little bit of a different play, a different juice from Philly because Joel Embiid making his return. And let's be honest, he did look strong in stretches and still got you 26, 10, and 6. But do you think his return actually changed the flow enough for Philly, or did Boston just adjust too quickly?
I mean, it didn't matter that he was out there. It was great to see him out there, and he played 34 minutes, and that was way more than I think anybody anticipated that he would be out there. I thought he would have been on a minutes restriction, maybe 20 to 25 minutes. Don't forget that he's only 17 days removed from having his appendix out, but he looked fantastic. He wasn't the problem tonight. It was just that the Celtics absolutely swarmed the Sixers and overwhelmed them. It was so bad, Kiana. So I take notes, right? I'm a professional analyst here, so I take little notes on the game, and I'm looking at my notes here for the Sixers, and it says disastrous first quarter. And then there aren't any more notes because there was nothing else to note about the Sixers except for that Joel Embiid returned and then they got swarmed and swamped. And this is almost over. There's only 4 more quarters left of Sixers basketball. The Celtics are going to wrap this thing up in Game 5.
Okay, well, I do want to talk a little bit more about Game 5 because, listen, nothing is guaranteed. Anything can happen. Their backs are against the wall. But if you are Philly, what is the one thing that gives you belief that this series can still get back to Game 6?
To get back to Game 6. I mean, this has happened in the past with the Sixers where, they'll steal another game and then they'll just prolong their humiliation against the Celtics. I am actually surprised, as you and I have discussed here on this program, that they even got Game 2 and stole one in the series. I thought it was going to be a sweep, but the Sixers aren't, and certainly Sixers fans aren't deluded into thinking that they could actually win this series. As everybody knows, the Sixers and the Celtics have played the most playoff series of any 2 teams in NBA history against each other, right? And the Celtics always come out on top. They have come out on top in every single postseason series against the Sixers since 1982. It's 2026. I would be shocked if the Sixers steal another game in Boston and force Game 6 because, again, the Celtics are just that much better than them. I anticipate that the Celtics will win that game. I think it's a 1-2-3 Cancun situation for the Sixers, and everybody will say the Celtics are moving on.
An ever so kind gentleman's sweep that John is anticipating happening with this series, but nonetheless, it's tough when you have Tatum, you have Brown, and you have Pritchard combining for 82 points, I believe, of their 128. It's going to be a hard trio and just roster because of their depth as well, but a hard roster to stop. But Sixers are going to try to do it as Game 5. That's set for Tuesday, and I know you and I will be talking about it We'll see how everything takes shape. Thank you so much, John Gonzalez, as always, taking a look at the largest road win in Celtics playoff history. This game, their 32-point victory, is tied for the longest. And we remember back in 2010 against the Cavaliers, they had another masterful performance against the Pistons back in 1991. And now Boston just one win away from sending Philly home, and they're on to the next. And we now welcome in CBS Sports NBA analyst John Gonzalez. And what a turn of events in Portland. Blazers leading by 19 at one point in the first half. The Spurs, they go on to just absolutely dominate the second half and going on to win 114-93. San Antonio becoming the first team in NBA playoff history to trail by at least 15 points at the half. And then you go on to win the game by 15 or more. But in your eyes, how are they able just to flip the switch there in the second half?
Yeah, they dominated at both ends of the floor in the second half. They outscored the Blazers 73-35 in the second half, and it was just, there's so much. You get so much of a boost from Victor Wembanyama, right? Because he comes back. He was in the concussion protocol. I was shocked that he even got on the plane to Portland. He didn't play in Game 3. Ends up going out there in Game 4 and having a 27-point double-double. But really, his biggest impact, Kiana, was at the defensive end, where he goes for 4 steals and 7 blocks. And not surprisingly, as a result of that, the Spurs absolutely dominated the points in the paint. When he's out there, the paint is a no-fly zone, and that's a problem for the Blazers because Denny Advia, who is their best player, likes to get into the paint. He likes to go downhill and drive, and that's a really difficult thing to do when you get there, all of a sudden Victor Wembanyama is lurking. And even though Denny had a pretty good game tonight, 26.7 rebounds, 3 assists, it just wasn't enough, and that's kind of hard to say because, if you're the Blazers, you need a big game from him to have a chance. You got it, and you still weren't in this thing because you absolutely collapsed in the second half. And I'm looking at a guy like Donovan Clingan, who's been an absolute disaster in the series. And then poor Scoot Henderson, he was big earlier in the series. Tonight, 27 minutes, 0 points. So the Spurs just put them on absolute lockdown in the second half, and that has everything to do with Wemby.
I want to go, let's dive more into Wemby, shall we? Because he showed no ill effects from that concussion, scoring 27 points to go along with those 11 rebounds and 7 blocks. But I want to take your impression of just his performance we saw in Game 4.
He's ridiculous. I mean, again, 7 blocks alone. If you're saying 7 blocks in a single game, that's otherworldly. There's a reason why he's the defensive player of the year and likely will be for the foreseeable future, if not for the stupid 65 game threshold. If he didn't have to clear a certain bar there, it would be his in perpetuity. The only thing that can possibly hold him back from winning it moving forward for the next, 5-10 years is if he doesn't play that many games. So on top of the 7 blocks, he has those 4 steals, and there were just nothing the Blazers could do to combat him on the defensive end. And then the offensive end, he was spectacular again. And that's really where he's leveled up this year, Kiana, where we all know what a phenomenal defensive player he is, but he's still figuring out what he can really do offensively. And when he really levels up on his game, when he finally really gets a consistent outside shot and then realizes that, and he did more of that this year, realizes that, I'm 7'4" or 5, and I can just dominate everybody in the paint. It's a wrap for everybody. And the Blazers, they didn't have an answer for him. Again, Donovan Clingan, not that guy. And then they did something pretty interesting, I thought, which was that they threw Drew Holiday at Victor Wembanyama a bunch. And that's sort of reminiscent of what the Thunder did last year with Nikola Jokic, where they would put Alex Caruso on him because, the traditional bigs, if that's not working, we might as well switch it up and give him a weird look. And Drew Holiday's a pretty good defender anyway. So that was just sort of a last-ditch effort by the Blazers. And it's not their fault, right? It's not their fault that they don't have an answer for Wemby because nobody does.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the point right there. Teams are trying to figure out what can you do to combat him. Like you said, they couldn't combat him offensively or defensively in this game. So that takes me to my next question, because the series, it is shifting to San Antonio for Game 5. That's on Tuesday. Just given the way these last 2 games have gone for Portland, do you view this series as potentially over?
Yeah, I think it's a wrap. I had it in 5 for the Spurs. I gave them a game. In this game, I thought they came out gangbusters, and I'm thinking, okay, well, Victor Wembanyama's back, but the Blazers are playing their best basketball in the first half. What happens if they tie this up? You go back to San Antonio. Now the Spurs are in their head. They're thinking a little bit, but the way that the Blazers collapse in the second half, now it's in their head, right? That's a long flight from Portland to San Antonio where you're thinking we just absolutely got run off our own floor after playing our best basketball in the first half. We played some of our worst basketball in the second half. And even if that hadn't happened, Kiana, the Spurs are just the better team, right? I mean, we all expected the Spurs to win this series pretty handily. I give the Blazers credit. They've had a great season. They've exceeded expectations. They really landed on something with Denny Advia. You're going to get Dame Lillard back next year. It's one of those things where, hey, we made the Spurs work a little bit harder than we thought, or maybe some other people thought that we were. And if they get a gentleman's sweep in game 5 and they come back from San Antonio with the series completely over and they go into their offseason, that's kind of what we all anticipated was going to happen.
Backs against